Politics. I'm your host, Darlene Price, and tonight we have a special edition, a special coverage of, what? Yeah, sorry, we're getting late start, so I'm kind of frazzled here. We had some technical difficulties, so we're kind of jumping out our you-know-whats to get you this show. But anyways, today we had a hearing. It was a sentencing hearing for, where's my glasses so I can see what I'm doing? For Police Captain Michael Carell. First I want to always say thank you so much for our followers on Facebook. Thank you very much for everybody that follows this show. Also, we want to thank MBR TV. This will broadcast live, or broadcast tomorrow on MBR TV. I thought it was going to broadcast live tonight on MBR TV, but we have some technical difficulties, so they're going to broadcast it tomorrow. It will also be on YouTube tomorrow, but tonight is going to be live on Facebook. So, we want to thank everybody behind the scenes who made this happen. Okay. James Madison said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. I saw this last week. I went to watch my daughter get sworn in as an assistant district attorney in Philadelphia, and I was a very proud moment. And so we took my little grandson with us for the week, so he had to do a book report, and so we took him to all the constitutional places and everything. And when we went to downtown Philly, Old Town Philly, to Constitution Square, that stuck out to me, that phrase. You know, if men were angels, there would be no need for government. There is a need for government, and there's a need for honest government. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Former Somerset Police Captain Michael Carell, who had previously pled guilty to 22 counts of stealing drugs, a gun, and other items from the Somerset Police Department evidence room. He was sentenced today in Pulaski County Circuit Court. In an emotionally charged courtroom, Judge Teresa Whitaker sentenced Carell to 5 years in prison. However, this is not the whole story. As I said in the promo, this story goes beyond this case, it goes beyond this cop, and it goes beyond this one evidence room. Carell had plea bargained for a 10-year sentence in order to not to go to trial and to keep the Commonwealth from requesting a sentence greater than 10 years, because a jury could have maxed him out at 20 years. Now, I understood Judge Whitaker to say that she sentenced him to 5 years and he will serve the 5 years. And maybe I missed it. It was really hard to hear in that courtroom today, and I'm telling you, I sat right on the front part of it. But my understanding was she sentenced him to 5 years and he was going to serve 5 years. However, because of the sentencing guidelines, there's a possibility he may only do 1 year. He will be eligible, that doesn't mean he'll get it, eligible parole in 1 year. Unless the stipulation was as she says. So we're gonna follow up on that. I'm gonna call tomorrow, make some calls tomorrow, and make sure I understood that correctly. When I went into this case, before I walked in that courtroom, I fully wanted this cop to get the max. I thought he should deserve to get 20 years. However, after listening to both sides and listening to the defense, I can understand the decision making for Judge Whitaker and why she did what she did. I just want to say, this was the longest sentencing hearing I ever sat in. I've sat in a lot of them. For those of you who are new to the show, I was a special agent for a lot of years, first in the military, and then was with the federal government, and now I serve as a defense investigator. I work with a lot of defense attorneys as a defense investigator. I've done a lot of time in courtrooms, and I'm telling you, I've never seen a judge take as much patience listening, and really listening to both sides, and for about 6 hours she did that. And I want to commend her for doing that, because in my opinion, all judges should do that, and many, or I should say most, do not. This is not just about, in my opinion, this is not just about this cop, this evidence room. There's really 4 elephants in the room in reference to this case. The 4 elephants in the room today were the cop, the evidence room, the issue of mental health in cops, and the issue of a failed system of evidence and evidence rooms in Kentucky I did a whole article, I'm going to read some of that in a minute, over a year ago, called Is Kentucky the Wild Wild West of Evidence Rooms? And the overall system that woefully failed us all, failed the cop. And again, I want to be real clear. I'm not trying to make this guy out to be the victim here. He's not. You do the time, you do the crime, you got to do the time. But there's a bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is this, and I'm going to go into some of the testimony that a police chief gave today that just really struck home with me. And that is this. This should have never gotten to this. This is a classic textbook case of how in the hell did this get this far. From the time this police officer applied to be a police officer, the system failed him and failed us. And again, I'm not trying to make him out to be a victim. I'm telling you he deserves at least to do 5 years, in my opinion, okay? At least. So he's not a victim here. But we're all victims, and all cops are victims in a way, when the system is a failure. With his background, what he testified to himself today, his background, the child abuse that he endured. How did he pass any kind of mental examination and get on the police force in the first place without some kind of counseling from the beginning? We're not weeding these guys out, and we're not, and I don't say weed them out. We're not getting them the help from the get-go. So you took a damaged. Here's what I heard today, and I say this because I've seen this before. In all my years in the criminal justice system, for the prosecution and defense, I've seen this over and over again, especially with cops. And this case is just like the textbook case for it. There's no intervention, there's no help, and there's a stigma attached to mental health issues with cops that is beyond belief. Like, you even ask for help. The witness today, and I'm going to get into this a little bit, he talked about the rubber gun syndrome. You're part of the rubber gun club where, we're going to take your badge and gun away because you're a liability. That starts at the beginning. We have not just in Kentucky, but nationwide, but Kentucky's worse. I'm sorry, but Kentucky's one of the worst states for the stigmatizing and no help for mental health for police officers with PTSD, and they're allowed to enter police forces without any kind of real weeding out process. This young man, from the time he submitted his application, there should have been a total evaluation of him, more than what was done. He should have had counseling from the beginning. And then once there was long-term counseling in place, before he was ever given a badge and gun and let to complete in the police academy, something should have been done. He should have gotten the help then. And I'm telling you, as we sit here today, hundreds of these police officers in Kentucky are going through these academies. They're not getting pulled aside. They're not getting the evaluation that they really need to have in Kentucky. And the ones that need help need to be pulled aside. No, you're not going into this academy yet. You're going to complete some long-term training. And there shouldn't be a stigma attached to it. This is where the system, from the get-go, failed us all with this police officer. And many like him. This is not an isolated incident. If you guys get a chance, I want you to go read a book. It's called The Onion Field. They made a movie about it later, and the whole time I'm listening to this cop's story, my mind is going to that book. I read the book first, and then the movie did a pretty good job too. But this should have never gotten this far. Okay, then he gets to the academy, and then he does 20 years before with nothing. There's nothing but a stellar performance as a police officer. And I just want to say something else too. Let me interject something here. And I wrote this 10 years ago. And keep in mind, this cop did 10 years of service before, or 10 years, 20 years of service before he really ever got himself, about 20 years, maybe a little bit less, before he ever got himself into trouble. And I wrote this 10 years. There are two kind of public officials and cops that cross the line. First, there's the premeditated sociopathic criminal that goes into the profession to use their job for their own nefarious purposes. Thankfully, I believe that these are few and far between. Or I hope these are few and far between. I know some people in the background here that you can't see are going on with all the people that we've exposed. I know it seems like a lot, but I'm hoping for every public official that we expose, and we've exposed a lot of them in the past, you know, there's 10, 20 of them that really do a good job. So I think that those are few and far between. The second type is, I think, what we're experiencing here. And again, I'm not making this guy out to be a victim, but if we don't address this problem, we're all in trouble. And that is, for the most part, crossing a line for any public official, and this is what I wrote 10 years ago, or police officer, usually does not happen overnight. Oftentimes it begins with bending the rules just a little bit, then in increments, tiny steps over time, and the rules are eroded. Officers and public officials are oftentimes way over the line before they even know it. They are trapped, and even if they want to find their way out, they don't know how. There's no help for them. And the stigmatism attached to that is one of ostracizing. Then it's about just surviving and self-preservation, sometimes at all cost. That's when people get hurt. That's when people get killed. The main ingredients for this is usually a combination of lack of training, lack of oversight, and a culture of impunity. These ingredients are a recipe for disaster. And if this isn't a classic case of lack of oversight, a culture of impunity, I don't know what is, and a lack of training, I don't know what is. And this is systemic throughout Kentucky law enforcement. And I've got friends in Kentucky law enforcement that, you know, they're going to get mad. Some of them will get mad because I'm saying this because, you know, it's again, back the blue becomes circle the wagons. But, you know, until you admit you have a problem, you can't fix it. Let me repeat that. Until you admit you have a problem, you cannot fix that problem. We have a problem in law enforcement nationwide, and specifically a big one in Kentucky with cops with PTSD, which most of them, if you've been on the force for any length of time, they have PTSD. And many of them, like this guy, he came to police work with PTSD. This kid was an abused child. And I know, being a child, many people have child abuse and they don't go out and commit crimes. I'm not saying he's a victim here, but there's a lot more we need to be doing and should be doing in law enforcement in Kentucky, preventative measures, so it doesn't get to this. This should never have happened. This should have never gotten this far. This guy should have gotten help before he entered the academy, during the academy, the whole time he was on the police force. He shouldn't have been ostracized. The stigma should not be there. And, you know, perhaps, just maybe, none of this would have happened. I want to quote a phrase, though, by Judge Whitaker, too. I was pretty proud of her today. She said, and this stuck with me, too. You know, she said, and I'm going to try to quote her, and I took some notes, and I was writing real fast in there, and it was hard to hear. So if I don't get this exact, it's pretty close. She said, I took an oath of office. Let me back up. When she was addressing why she did not just give him probation, because she could have just gave him probation today. He could have walked out of there a free man. Okay, she could have done that. But when she was trying to address why she didn't do that, and why she gave him 5 years, this is what she said. I took a specific oath when sworn in, as did every police officer. It is with that oath and with that belief that we who take the oath should be held to a higher standard. Police officers take an oath to serve and protect us. And I believe that oath, I believe in that oath of the officer means something. And the punishment should fit the crime. She's right. He took an oath of office, and I agree. Police officers absolutely should be held to a higher standard. Absolutely. And the punishment nobody should get away with what he shouldn't get away with what he did, and he should serve time. Nobody's saying that. But here's the flip side of that coin. If you're being held to a higher standard and you're going to have that kind of stress, and police officers have the highest amount of stress, and someone, I just had a conversation with somebody who said, well, you know, the everyday person has stress too, and the everyday person would be held accountable and would go to jail. Okay, you're right. Here's the difference. The everyday person walking the street doesn't have a badge and gun, doesn't have deadly force, and doesn't have the ability to affect your Fourth Amendment rights. This is why this case is not just about this case. This is about mental health and law enforcement and where we go wrong. By not addressing the fact, first off, not having the ability or refusing to do it, because I think a lot of police departments and I think a lot of these academies, they just don't do it. When you don't really sit each officer down and take the time to figure out, is there something, does this guy have or girl? I say guy, I meant, girl, guy. Does this person have problems? Do they need help? That should be done early on. Again, before they ever even enter a police academy. And without the stigma. We're not doing that. Kentucky's not doing that. They made some strides ahead of time, but very, very few. And I'm going to get into this guy's testimony here in a minute. Okay, let's do that now, because I want to have time. We're at 6:22. Okay, I want to have time to get into the absolute FUBAR of the evidence rooms in Kentucky, because that's the other elephant in the room. Okay, the defense called Keith Middleton as a witness for the defense. This Keith Middleton was very impressive to me, and he made some very, very good points. Better than I'm making right now. I wish I could get a copy of this film of his cross-examination, his examination, because what he said just struck a lot home. This is a guy who had over 30 years of law enforcement, or about 30 years, and he was a police chief for 17 years and a supervisor role since 1995. It's safe to say that this guy knew what he was talking about is an understatement, okay? One of the things he said was, where was the structure that allowed this individual to access this evidence room after he retired? And, good point. And I'm going to read my little thing on evidence rooms in Kentucky, because there's no... Let me interject here, because I'm trying to make 2 points at the same time. There are no laws or regulations that evidence rooms in Kentucky have regular audits, real audits, not self-audits, like, I get to audit my own evidence room, which is what's going on. That's what happened in Pulaski County Evidence Room, where there's now, $25,000 to $30,000 missing. And, by the way, 5 pages of missing evidence, which keeps getting glossed over by other media and other people. Okay, out of the Pulaski County Evidence Room. And this started in 2015. We covered this ad nauseum, and I want to hit it again today. And now you have this evidence room. Plus you have the KSP evidence rooms. When you don't have laws and regulations in place, mandate that evidence rooms will have check and balances, real check and balances. In other words, you're going to be inspected at least once a year by the Attorney General's office, or somebody with a badge and gun that could put somebody in jail. Not just your own little self-audit, and it's going to be a real audit, a real inspection. If you don't have that, this happens. Okay, and what happened in the Pulaski County Evidence Room, and by the way, what's happened in the Kentucky State Police evidence rooms all across Kentucky. The system of evidence rooms, are lawmakers in Kentucky, your state legislature, has failed us miserably in this. And, this guy hits it, and I've hit it in other shows, and we'll hit it some more in a minute. I want to get back, I'm getting tangled up here, to this guy's testimony. One of the things he said about the mental health issue is it's also about pride. he used the phrase, he goes, the administration and most of these police organizations, they put the cops in a box. In the back of their mind, the administrator, they make them feel like you're a liability. You can't ask for help. Most are not have PTSD. He turned around and he looked at all the police officers. By the way, there was like, I think 14, at least 14 police, maybe 15 police officers showed up today in support of the prosecution. You know, that they're backing the prosecution. And I get that. I get that. Flip side of that coin is this. Again, back the blue becomes circle the wagons. One of the things I like what this police chief did is he turned around and looked at these guys and he said, you know what? Most of you have PTSD. You're sitting here right now. You don't realize it, and you're not getting the help. And, you know, I was looking over and watching these guys as this police chief testified for this guy. And he talked about PTSD and how there's a stigma and you can't get help. If you ask for help, you're not going to get promoted anymore. You're going to be on the rubber gun squad. He talked about all of that. And as he was talking about that, I was watching some of the police officers sitting over there in support of the prosecution. And you could just read it on their face. You could see it on several of these police officers' face. Their head went down, and that look of, he's talking about me, was prevalent. And I think that's sad. I think this whole story is sad. I think it's just a sad state of affairs. Again, I know some of you are going to accuse me of making this guy out to be a victim. I'm not. He needs to do time, at least 5 years in my opinion. He could have gotten 20. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we have a problem, a big one, and nobody's addressing it. There's been a little bit of addressing it in Kentucky, but pretty much a colossal failure. A colossal failure. And this is dangerous. You know, this guy didn't hurt anybody. Well, he did. He hurt cases. He hurt his family. I'm talking physically. You know, he didn't go out there high as a kite and shoot somebody. Okay, but let me tell you something. This happens in law enforcement. Law enforcement officers are suffering from PTSD. They get a hold of drugs. Somehow, most of them are addicted to alcohol, and they're out in the field, and they're armed with deadly force. And there's no real drug testing, you know, that they have to do. Random drug testing, it shouldn't be random. There should be better drug testing and alcohol testing for these guys, and there's not. There's no checks and no really good checks and balances. No interceding before any of this happens. It's just not there. The structure is not there, and that's what this guy, the point he was making. He referred to the thing called the John Wayne syndrome. Boy, have I seen that in law enforcement, where cops have this feeling that they got to be flawless, they got to be John Wayne all the time. They're put under tremendous pressure, and then they have to make decisions in split seconds, you know, that could cost them for years. Well, if you're suffering from PTSD and you're an alcoholic, which a lot of cops are, okay, and you're put in a position of deadly force, so you got to make a split second. Who's on the other side of this deadly force? Do you want to be on the other side of deadly force with a cop with PTSD that got no help, that shouldn't have been there in the first place? That's, you know, an alcoholic? No. It puts everybody in danger. So this is not just about this cop. This is about the public. You know, in the best interest of the public, we need to be doing something about this because it's prevalent. This is not an isolated incident. In my humble opinion, every cop I know will tell you, they'll say, well, every single cop out there will tell you, I know at least one cop that fits this bill. I know at least one cop suffering from severe PTSD and needs help, and he ain't going to get it. That's scary. That's all you people out here watching this tonight, that should scare you to death. And again, I'm not anti-cop. My brother's a former state police investigator, retired. I was a cop for years. You know, I'm pro-cop. And what I'm telling you is, a lot of them need help. And they need intervention before any of this happens. And that's not happening. So, when the system fails, we all suffer. This guy suffered, his family suffers, everybody suffers. Let me see. He made comments like, there's no support system for officers until it's too late. Most cops, because of pride, they won't ask for help, and they know if they ask for help, they're going to be stigmatized, and you know they're going to be put on the rubber gun squad. They know that it's just their career could be over. Let me go on. Okay, so I got to say this too. I got to give Prosecutor Dalton some commandos. I know I've thrown, most of you who are long-term watchers of the show, I have thrown Prosecutor Dalton under the bus. I have, and rightfully so, about some things. I got to say he did a really good job today, because the points he made on cross and the points he made is, look, you know, yeah, does that mean this guy should get away with what he did? I mean, that was the basic of his, he did a very, very good job of cross-examination. You know, and he made the point again, cops should be held to a higher standard. He also made a point about premeditation. And he also made a big point about having 90 grams of meth found in this guy's garage. Yeah, the guy needed help. Yeah, the guy had an addiction. But there's the other thing, too. The average Joe out there, if you find the amount of drugs that was found in this cop's garage, he would have been charged, I'm telling you, he would have been charged with possession for sale. Okay? So keep that in mind. I thought Dalton made that very eloquently, what he did. And he also made a very eloquent argument about this cop had to use 3 key cards that he wasn't supposed to have to access this evidence room, and a key code, you know, a punch-in key code to get in. Now, once he retired, he somehow kept those key cards or I think he just kept them. And then still was allowed to access these 3 cards. That does show an element of premeditation. I thought Dalton did a really good job of that. But the flip side, and he had 8,500 pills missing over a course of time. And then he went into how many times he entered that evidence room. Well, that shows premeditation on the cop's side, and that don't look good for the cops. But here's the flip side of that coin. What does that tell you about that evidence room? He was allowed to do that. Hello, we have a problem. Here's the other elephant in the room. Evidence rooms. And again, this is not an isolated incident. I want to read to you, for those of you who watch the show, you probably heard this, I know you heard this before. I'm sorry, bear with me. I wrote this article after the Pulaski County evidence room was exposed, and after the dog narcotics, training narcotics was exposed, and after the Somerset PD thing was disclosed. And this was written, and I read it on the show, maybe a year and a half ago, Michael? About a year and a half ago? Okay, here it is. The fictional character Sherlock Holmes was often quoted as saying, "Follow the money." This, of course, was based upon a long-established assumption that one could actually follow a chain of evidence, a money trail that would lead Holmes to discover the bad guy. But what if all important evidence was then tainted or lost once it reached the all-important evidence room? What then? Decades of analysis, research, investigation, instruction, and U.S. Supreme Court cases have centered on this very thing, the proper collection, storage of evidence surrounding criminal cases. Entire bachelor degrees and prestigious universities have centered around the chain of custody and evidence collection. I'm telling you, through my law degree, I have a law degree, through my undergraduate degree, 80% of it was about chain of custody of evidence. You just lived, eat, and breathe how important it was, evidence room and chain of custody of evidence. Law schools literally have hours and hours dedicated to the importance of this area of law. Moreover, there are literally 5 hit television shows centered around CSI. crime scene investigation. Why, one should ask, is this topic so important? It's the simplest of answers. So that the innocent go free and the guilty are made to answer. When the chain of custody of criminal evidence cannot be trusted, the order of fair and just system is most certainly under attack, and the results are nothing less than dangerous. Dangerous for the innocently accused and dangerous for victims of crimes. Recently in Kentucky, it has become very apparent that there are little to no checks and balance systems on evidence rooms where this all-important evidence is being stored. Careful research into the Kentucky Rules of Evidence, Kentucky Revised Statutes, Kentucky League of Cities, KLC, and the Kentucky Association of Counties, KACO, yielded that there are no real apparent laws or procedures that mandated regarding the storage, conduct, and oversight of Kentucky's evidence room after evidence has been admitted to these said rooms. There are no laws or regulations regarding that an outside independent agency conduct routine surprise audit of Kentucky's evidence room. And what has come out in several court hearings is that basically these evidence rooms are allowed to just audit themselves or do no audit at all. No audits at all. Some of them 6 years with no audits. In December 2019, 3 Kentucky State Police Command... This is important because this ain't just about this guy, this evidence room, or Pulaski County. Listen to this. December 2019, 3 Kentucky State Police commanding officers filed a whistleblower lawsuits against the state and the department claiming that they were retaliated against for reporting that troopers were stealing evidence from property rooms seized from criminal cases. A jury in this lawsuit awarded these 3 troopers $900,000, just under $1 million in this whistleblower case, and rightfully so. Just in one county alone, Pulaski County, it has come to light that evidence rooms controlled by the Pulaski County Sheriff and the Somerset Police Department have been easily breached and evidence gone missing. In the Pulaski County, Pulaski County PCSD alone, since 2015, pages of evidence and currency have gone missing in numerous criminal cases. This missing evidence involves, but is not limited to, the following. Approximately $25,000. I think it's more, but we'll give the devil their due. $25,000. Drugs, DNA evidence, weapons, ammunition, spent rounds, and several computers, laptops, just to name a few. Also discovered in the Kentucky State Police investigation that followed was the fact that the master key to the evidence room had been missing for God knows how long, and anybody and everybody had pretty much access to the evidence room. So there was no oversight of the Pulaski County evidence room. What followed in the discovery of this missing evidence was nothing short of shocking. Through information gained from confidential sources and from actual evidence hearing on this very discovery, it was exposed by Truth or Politics that the Pulaski County evidence room had no type of audit for 5 years. No audit. Then only when the outsider discovered the missing currency did an audit show that there was much more missing evidence than just currency. A much larger problem was that it was painfully disclosed in the same hearing was the fact that no one from any objective outside agency was conducting the audits for the Pulaski County evidence room. The Pulaski County evidence room for years was simply allowed to audit itself or inspect themselves with absolutely no oversight. And what came out today in that hearing is Somerset Police Department evidence room was pretty much playing on the same tune. No outside audits and no audits for like years. Okay, where I'm at. It was found that the Pulaski County evidence room had video surveillance. The surveillance recordings, which was also evidence, was not properly retained and stored to be used by the investigator to ascertain who and how this evidence went missing. So that even their videotape they had on their evidence room, they didn't put it in the cloud or anything. You couldn't go back and see what was what. To date, this case has been conveniently closed. This is on the Pulaski County missing evidence, and no one has been fired, and no one is going to jail. This prompted me to ask the question about evidence procedures and handling of evidence rooms and other lockers all across Kentucky. Just as I was diving into this readily apparent problem, and only weeks after Pulaski County missing evidence was exposed, yet another incident in the same county demonstrated yet another breach of security, and that's the Pulaski County, Somerset PD incident. Now, I'm not going to go into that because we've already kind of gone into that. A search of the Kentucky Fire Statutes and Administrative Rules and Regulations in Kentucky have yielded little actual laws, regulations, or objective enforcement from any outside auditing agency regarding evidence rooms in Kentucky. For the most part, evidence rooms all across the state are simply allowed to escape any type of objective outside oversight or audits. What this means is that when police officers testify before the grand juries and in preliminary hearings, excuse me, their testimony regarding this all-important chain of custody and storage of evidence is just blindly accepted as pure and trustworthy. Most defense attorneys don't question chain of custody, and they need to in Kentucky. I wonder how many true bills would have been handed down by grand juries if they knew ahead of time that the evidence rooms could be compromised and evidence not only gone missing, but potentially altered for the prosecution. Surely in several compromised evidence rooms like Pulaski County, one must wonder what else has transpired, like altering evidence or making evidence disappear in order to falsely release a suspect or convict suspects in criminal cases. This is a fair question. This is a question that the state of Kentucky lawmakers and administrators must find an answer to in order to restore faith in the criminal justice system in Kentucky. This is exactly how innocent people go to jail and how the guilty may walk free. Again, I cannot express enough how dangerous this gaping black hole in our criminal justice system actually is. Honest cops who work diligently to properly collect and process criminal evidence will suffer when it is exposed in the system that the overall security of said evidence may be compromised by sloppy, negligently run evidence rooms. Moreover, suspects who cannot afford the best expensive criminal defense attorneys, like, this cop today, Carell, I got to hand it to him. His defense attorneys did a great job. I got to commend it to Bartley, and I think it was his wife, her name was Bartley too. They did a good job. Well, guess what? Not every defendant has the money to hire, a defense attorney. Not that I'm saying that public defenders are bad, and I get into that here in a second too. Need my glasses. Sorry about that. Moreover, suspects who cannot afford expensive criminal defense attorneys are oftentimes at a severe disadvantage. The element of time is not on their side. These suspects will be assigned a public defender who oftentimes is overwhelmed with too many cases. They simply don't have the time to carefully review or have investigators like me dig into these type of cases where the chain of custody of evidence is paramount to any case. There are very good, honest, and hardworking public defenders. However, it has been well established that public defenders, more often than not, do not have the funding or time to do what a high-paid criminal defense attorney and firms can do. Recently, a phrase has been coined: you're better off being guilty and rich than being innocent and poor. Let me repeat that. In the criminal justice system, you're better off being guilty and rich than being innocent and poor. That's a sad state of affairs. Case in point is the famous O.J. Simpson murder case, when O.J. Simpson walked free primarily because he could afford the dream team of the best criminal defense attorneys. What happened in that case has now been studied and analyzed by jurisprudence all across the field of criminal justice. These attorneys had the time and access and assets to investigate and pick apart the prosecution's case. That's the other problem in Kentucky too, is, we dump a whole lot more money into the prosecution side, tax dollars, into the prosecution side than we do into the defense side for public defenders. I think that that's wrong. I think that that's fair. And I know people have said, oh, you just say that now because you play for the defense. No, I say that now because I see through the eyes of a defense attorney as an investigator for them what goes on. And these evidence room problems is a real problem because what is going on in Kentucky evidence rooms needs to be solved. There needs to be check and balances, and there are not. They're just not. And, and again, that's not an excuse for what this guy did. It's just not. I'm not trying to make this guy out to be a victim. But what I'm trying to demonstrate tonight is this case has very much shined a light, or it should. This case should be the shining, big, gaping light for everybody to see that, Houston, we got a problem. We got a problem here. And if you don't start admitting we got a problem, you're not going to fix it. And what's going to happen is the guilty will go free and the innocent will go to jail, if that's not already happened. It's just not good. One of the things that Bartley said was very true. And again, I'm not making a victim out of this guy. I'm telling you he needs to do time, okay? So put that aside for a minute. But he did make some very good points. One of the things, and I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to try to quote him. It probably ain't going to be exact. But one of the points he made is, we tend to put cops on a pedestal. They're put on a pedestal and they're held to a higher standard. And they should be held, I'm not saying that's wrong. You need to be held to a higher standard, but then we don't pay them what they deserve. A lot of our little sheriff's departments, they're making minimum wage, okay? Let me repeat that because I got people watching all over the United States because of my prior job. Here in Kentucky and in some states, you have sheriff deputies going out there night after night, putting their life at risk, and they're doing it for minimum wage. Okay, that's got to change. When you can't afford to feed your family, when you got the pressures at home, when you go home because you're not making enough money and you're putting your life at risk, can you imagine the kind of pressure that puts cops under? We're putting them under this pressure. They have to be perfect. We're not giving them the help they need. We're not interceding ahead of time to try to give them the help they need. We're not doing a good job, especially in the state of Kentucky, of evaluating these guys and girls before they even enter the profession and either getting the help, or some of them are like that one group I was reading about. There's people out there that will enter the police profession to be crooks. They're going to use that job to be crooks. Think not? Go take a look at LAPD. There's a movie out, and Johnny Depp does a great job. I know I'm referring to a movie, but it is really well done. And I'm very familiar with this because I worked a lot with LAPD out when I was in Los Angeles area working narcotics. It's called City of Lies. It's where street gangs, the Crips, the Bloods, they actually infiltrated the LAPD, went through the academy, and then the whole Biggie Small case and Tupac Shakur case. Go watch that movie. If you think that people won't infiltrate police departments to be criminals, you better think again. And our criminal justice system, again, is failing us at weeding these people out. Now, I don't think this guy is that. I don't think Captain Correll or former Captain Correll, I don't think he entered the police agency or the police field to be a crook. How do I know that? Well, guess what? For 20 years, he did a stellar job. I think he belongs in category number 2. He had childhood trauma, never addressed. And let me tell you something else too. Well, he's just playing the victim. He just, the PTSD card. I know cops. You do not stand in front of God and everybody in a whole courtroom full of people and about 30 cops sitting over there, on the opposite side, and sit there and talk about your childhood like this guy did, unless it's real. You just don't do that. I think this cop was traumatized as a child. I think he suffered child abuse. And I think that before he ever entered into the police field, somebody should have grabbed him, pulled him aside, and he should have gotten help. Certainly after he entered the police field. But somehow he managed to do about 20 years, maybe some less, with no problems. And then he got hurt and got hooked on pain pills. This is a textbook case that we've seen over and over again. And everybody out there listening tonight, I'm telling you, every cop will tell you. I know a cop that's just like this guy. And maybe he hasn't crossed the line yet. Maybe he'll never cross the line. I don't know. But until we do a better job in law enforcement, especially here in Kentucky, of identifying these people, getting them help, not stigmatizing, getting mental health, until we do a better job, this is going to keep happening. Moreover, the evidence room situation in Kentucky sure made it easy for this guy. Again, I'm not giving this guy an excuse for what he did. Let me repeat. He needs to do time. He needs to do at least 5 years, in my opinion, okay? That's what I think. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying he's a victim here. However, the evidence room situation, your lawmakers, the people running the show in Kentucky in law enforcement, sure made it easy for this guy to do what he did. And sure made it easy for the law enforcement officials in the state police that these two whistleblowers tried to blow the whistle on, steal evidence from those evidence room. And oh, by the way, it sure was easy for the Pulaski County Sheriff's Department evidence room to be pilfered 5 pages at least that we know of, and a whole bunch of money. Oh, by the way, that the taxpayers had to pay back. Folks, this guy needs to, if you do the crime, you do the time. This guy needed to do time, okay? But to only say that's the only issue here, oh, he got caught, he did the time, case closed. That's wrong, okay? That's just wrong in so many levels. There's the other elements in the room are the mental health issue with cops and PTSD. And let me tell you something, PTSD is real. We did a whole show, we've done a couple shows on this, PTSD being real, especially with cops. Not just cops. One of the points that this witness made, what was his name? I got a brain fart. What was it? The witness that was a 30-year police chief. One of the points he made is, he works with this now. Anybody who's a first responder is going to have PTSD. I'm telling you, it's a rare occasion that you work in this kind of field where you see this kind of violence. You show up at accident scenes and people are mangled. He talked about, pulling pieces of bodies off of railroad tracks. You can't do that kind of work and not have it affect you. It's going to affect you. And I like the point he made that all those police officers sitting there, trying to be, part of the back the blue, which we need to back the blue, but back the blue should not become circle the wagons. When you get on that high horse and you become a judgmental jerk of someone who needs help, and you're in a supervisor position, and you don't do anything about it, in fact, you do the opposite, then you should be in a jail cell right next to somebody like this, because you're a part of the problem. So that's my humble opinion. To me, today's hearing was about a lot more than this cop, was about a lot more than this evidence room, and was about a lot more than the mental health situation with cops in Kentucky. This needs to be fixed. This cop needs to do time. And I'm sorry, it was pitiful to the wife that got up there and testified. I felt for her. The damage that it's done to that family is beyond. My heart goes out to them. They're victims too. The biggest victims of this are the family of that cop and those kids. I feel so sorry for them. It's bad all the way around. But I think in time they will understand that if you do the crime, you got to do the time. And cops do need to be held for a higher standard, just like Judge Whitaker said. I agree with her on that. And I agree with Dalton on that. So, bottom line is this. Until the state of Kentucky lawmakers or the powers that be in the state of Kentucky who can do something about what's going on in law enforcement in Kentucky until somebody gets their head out of their you-know-what and fixes these problems, fixes these evidence rooms, makes some laws and regulations, fixes the mental health issue. This is going to keep happening. This is not an isolated incident. So this is dangerous to the public. Let me repeat that. This is dangerous to the public, and it needs to be fixed. And you, the citizens out there, need to start calling your lawmakers, your state representatives, your state lawmakers, and say, hey, what are you doing about this? You know, this is ridiculous. Anyway, I want to thank everybody. Anything I missed? My hecklefish back there. Anything I missed? No. Okay. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. We want to thank MBR TV. We want to thank everybody watching out there. This was a hard case to sit through the courtroom. I feel for the families. I also feel for the cops on the other side. This was a tough case. And you know what? I really feel for Judge Whitaker because, you know, I would not want to be in her seat having to decide this case after the testimony I heard today. That's all I'm going to say about that. We'll see you next time on Truth or Politics. Thanks.